In 1987, GM won the World Solar Challenge race. GM CEO Roger Smith challenged the same design team to build a prototype for a practical electric car.
To drive the motor for all the different driving conditions.
Allen's breakthrough power system helped create an electric car unlike any that had ever been driven before.
I had one of those early EV1s, and I used it here in the Capitol. I loved the car.
Believe it or not, that sucker goes. That thing will take you down the PCH so fast you could get a ticket.
They were quiet and fast, produced no exhaust, and ran without gasoline.
And we started seeing the momentum building for this and the waiting lists being created for these cars.
10 years later, these futuristic cars were almost entirely gone. GM spokesman Dave Barthmus has worked for GM for nearly 10 years.
We spent in excess of $1 billion to drive this market, to build the market.
We would sit down with Hal Riney or with executives from GM and make, how far, how fast, how much? These are the three questions we're getting. Please put it in the advertising. It's not rocket science. And they would go back and do the exact opposite. So we started this waiting list in order to prove demand to GM. But no matter how many people we got on that list, it was never considered enough demand.
We have heard about these long waiting lists. We contacted each of those folks, and we whittled that list down.
Only recently did they finally admit that there actually was a waiting list.
And we whittled that list down.
We were having a lunch in the executive dining room at the GM Tech Center one day, and just the two of us, and he leans over to me and he says, "Dobbles, you know something? You're my worst enemy." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Well, I'm out there lobbying to show that there's no demand for electric vehicles, and you're out there proving me wrong."
As car companies made the case there was no demand, GM quietly closed its EV1 assembly line and began laying off its sales force.
They started with the ones with the biggest waiting list.
Studying General Motors practices over the years, the executives at the top, their motto seemed to have been going backwards into the future.
When I noticed that GM was losing interest was when I wanted to release my car, and they wouldn't let me.
They didn't give me an option to buy. They said, "Thank you for leasing the car.
Turn
Bye-bye.
it in now. Turn it in by such and such a date, or you're going to be held liable."
GM did do it right. They did create a great car. It's well engineered, it's well designed, and it's enjoyable to drive. I've never seen a company be so cannibalistic about its own product before. It's such an odd experience.
Flew over General Motors, and looking down, we could see right next to the racetrack where the EV1 was first tested, we saw, I don't know, maybe 50 EV1s crushed and put on top of semi-flatbeds.
The fate of the last 78 EV1s remained in doubt, that there was not enough demand for the electric car.
And we whittled that list down.
Claiming to have spent millions of dollars on advertising, they said buyers weren't interested.
$1.9 million to General Motors.
General Motors, 40, 50 years ago, bought up the trolley systems and shut them down. The oil companies have opposed the creation of an electric infrastructure.
I made the case at the General Motors board that the reason for the EV1 was to give General Motors a very big head start. They could not understand how Toyota could possibly make a profit out of the Prius, for example. They were going to lose their shirt.
As it gave enormous incentives to buy SUVs, the federal government also sued California to stop the electric car.
It's David versus Goliath in a very big way. But if there are enough Davids in the world, we can win.
The last EV1s in the Burbank lot were taken away and destroyed.
It will go down as one of the biggest blunders in the history of the automotive industry.
We all have to adapt to change. Let's build new industries. Let's make America strong again.
We shred the car, about a car a minute, 1,000 cars a day on a good day.
And what's interesting, the first thing we noticed when we drove up here, you're going to be shredding some new cars here, too. These look like perfectly good cars. Why are you shredding them up?
A little bit of a mystery, really.
Goliath won this round, but now Goliath has new problems.
There's no precedent for a car company rounding up every one of a particular kind of car and crushing them as if they're afraid one might get away.
I know you're all worried, and I agree. There's plenty to be worried about. Like this solar power plant, already operational outside Los Angeles. Photovoltaic cells. They convert sunlight directly into electricity. Fluorescent. Lasts 10 times as long as a conventional light bulb. Uses only a quarter of the power. An electric car. Partially powered by solar panels. But the truth is, gentlemen, I'm not worried about any of these things. Because no one's ever going to know about